Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Rob Moore's Leadership Untitled Podcast, the show that brings together experts from the world of leadership and/or L&D and shares the traps that we can easily fall into in the hope that you guys don't have to fall into the same ones. My guest this week is Steve Purdham. Now, Steve is a serial entrepreneur, forever looking to fuel his passions and to discover and develop great people to come along on those journeys with him. His projects have seen him build and sell a number of companies, including internet security provider SurfControl, which he built from nothing and led to a valuation of just over $1 billion. A number more ventures and a visit to Dragon's Den later, and Steve is still as passionate about business and people than ever. So let's explore all of that and more as I welcome Steve to the Leadership Untitled Podcast. Hi Steve, welcome to the Leadership Untitled Podcast. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm really good, Tar. Really good. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on to the show today. For the listeners out there and the people watching it on YouTube, I guess it's just important to let them know how I know you. So I've known you. I can't believe I'm going to say this now, but I think it's about 17 years nearly.
Yeah, and the rest. Yeah.
Can you believe that?
Yeah, and we don't look a day older, do we?
Oh, absolutely not. No, I mean, I know I looked about 60 then. No. So it was around. I think it was May, in the May of 2004. I joined the company that obviously you were leading at the time, which was SurfControl. That was based at its headquarters in my hometown, Congleton, and a good friend of mine, a good kind of a dual friend of ours, Ross Dyer, was working there at the time. So he always had some great things to say. And, you know, I think I was at SurfControl for only around about 3.5 to 4 years, I think, by the end of it. Obviously the end of that, and we might touch on this later on, it was actually, it was bought out and sold to another company. But what always stands out to me about that time, and everyone I speak to about it, is just the atmosphere. Just, it always had that feel, not just, you know, I know Ross was in it when it was really early doors and, you know, probably 3 men in a cupboard doing some stuff together. That sounded wrong, didn't it? But anyway, but it always maintained that feel. It always maintained the feel of being a young, energetic and fun company to work at. But not only that, it seemed to me, and you know, and this is talking about multinational as well, that everyone knew you and you knew everyone. I would walk up and down the corridors, and if I bumped into you, it'd be, "Hi Rob, how are you doing today?" And it's very rare, even in small companies of like maybe with 20 people, that isn't always the case. So it's really good for me to like have you on today, because I want to explore that and explore your thoughts of leadership, because I think from that point of view, you were very much an inspirational leader to lots of people at that time in that company. So I guess, you know, from your point of view, do you want to give us a bit of a background? Obviously, SurfControl is one chapter of your life and career. Do you want to give us a bit of a background of the sort of stuff you've done in your life and career?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I started as a failed techie. I mean, my background is, I did a degree in computer science, but I probably talked too much to actually be a techie with the headphones on, sitting in a corner, coding away. And that gave me an opportunity to explore different avenues of business. And it was interesting how I learned certain aspects of knowledge, and we can talk about that a little bit later on. But then I went on to, I started life with the UK's biggest computer company, a company called ICL, International Computers Limited, who no longer exists. Mm-hmm. They were bought by Fujitsu and have now disappeared off into the wilderness. But I then started to really cut my teeth on different roles, you know, sales roles, support roles, marketing roles, and I got a good insight into lots of different areas, and that helped me, I think, throughout my career. And in the 90s, I discovered something called marketing, which again, we can talk about a bit later. And that was really some of the formation of SurfControl, and why SurfControl went from being a nice little UK business based in the Silicon Valley of the North Congleton to become a global international business, which at one time was one of the first UK internet unicorns worth over £1 billion at one time. After SurfControl, or during SurfControl, I realized when I was sitting in my office one day, working out that if I moved so many engineers from Sydney to Shenzhen, I could increase EBITDA by 0.3%. I realized this isn't what I really liked. I like the people. I like understanding the people. I like actually taking something from nothing and building it. And when you're running a PLC, a global PLC, then it all becomes about the numbers rather about the people and things that you're doing. And it's difficult to maintain that line. So after SurfControl, I then went into a whole series of different startups. Some were successful, some were draws. I started a music business with Peter Gabriel, the rock legend. Yeah. And a business called We7, very much like Spotify. One time we had 3 million users in the UK and 16 million records, way before anybody understood what the world of streaming was all about. And that was sold to Tesco's. I did another business, and it went from there. I've just done different businesses, and now I'm currently chairman of a fantastic business out in Sheffield called Westfield Health, which is about looking after people on a day-by-day basis, and we're a pan-European company at the moment. So a bit of everything, but the core is I love technology businesses, and I love building something from nothing, and I love dealing with people as we do that.
Yeah, and that shines right through all the way through that there. I mean, I know even for us just to get a chat about coming on and doing this podcast, it was a nightmare getting in touch with each other because you've been really busy just helping out with the vaccination clinics, I believe, as we are still in the world of COVID at time of recording. What are we, just at the end of February? So it's going well, but you've been really busy with that recently, haven't you?
Yeah, my next door neighbour happens to have a chain of pharmacies, and he asked for some help, and that help resulted in me end up building a whole vaccination centre and running the operation. And glad to say that's actually going well enough so I can now actually come and talk to you, Rob, and it's just working behind the scenes now.
Brilliant stuff. But again, it's just probably just indicative of the fact that, what you get involved in something, you don't get involved with one foot, you jump straight in and you do everything you can, don't you?
Yeah, the idea of part-time work or part involvement is a difficult concept for me. It's either all or nothing, really.
Yeah. I mean, I know you've highlighted technology as being kind of a red thread, if you want to call it that, all the way through, but you've mentioned people a lot there. And I guess, that for me, it just stands out, even though we've just been talking about the vaccination clinics, it's people again with technology behind it with all the vaccinations. Explain to me your thoughts about that. Why is it that, I mean, I don't think it's natural for all leaders, and certainly not business leaders and business founders, to necessarily put people at the front of what they do and what they believe and how they lead. What is it that makes you view people so importantly in that?
I suppose it's the realization that I'm average, and I've always been average. And if you look at my school reports from when I was a teenager or before, I was average at everything. And you need people to make you look better and feel better and actually achieve things in a much better way. And if I look at all the areas of success over the years and all the areas of failures, it's never been on your own. When you're a CEO of a business, you are isolated, and it's a fairly lonely role to have. But if I look at all the areas of success, it's always been with multiple people. We7, there was a business with a guy called Gareth. SurfControl was not me; it was actually myself and a guy called Rob Barrow, who pushed things there. And throughout the whole lot, like at the moment, Westfield Health, I'm chairman, but actually the CEO is a fantastic guy called Dave Kappa, and it's really having somebody who you can be close to, because you're only a leader if the people want you to be. I mean, you can be aggressive and dominant, and you can rule by fear, but that isn't how I believe you get the best out of people. And so it's always about other people actually making things happen. but they have to want to. And I suppose the skill, even though I didn't think I had it, is actually getting people to believe what you believe in.
And how do you think you went about that and really got, because I think that is one of the big things I hear, certainly from, I would say, the kind of small to medium sized enterprises, that when they grow to a certain point, one of the frustrations that senior managers have is that people just don't seem to care about it as much as I do.
Yeah, it is a hard situation, and we talked about SurfControl, which is the one that was the most successful, and it went from nothing to 14 offices around the world. It went from nothing to 800 people, and nothing to being worth over £1 billion. And you get pulled from pillar to post. But if and you have to recognise that a business is really a machine. It needs to be fed. It needs to be delivered. And sometimes, and quite often, you lose control of that machine. And you have to, and that's where I think a lot of business leaders start to lose sight of the people around them. You should always understand that, the machine itself doesn't care about people. So you as the person in charge has to care about people. And even if that means, it's how you look after them as the machine tries to become more demanding. It's just something that has to be managed.
So it's interesting. I know that we had obviously a chat before today just to talk about some of the things we might cover. And that's one of the things that really jumped out at me when you talked about business as being the machine. Because I know one of my things that I say quite a lot, and then I think you correctly put a challenge on before, was to go, you wouldn't want to get rid of a team that was adding obvious value to an organization. And I think you quite rightly challenged that and said to me, well, no, that's not always the case. The machine is the machine, and sometimes things need to be done that you'd prefer not to, and sometimes doesn't necessarily make sense in one way, but absolutely does for the other. Do you want to go into that a little bit more about what you mean about this machine and how that influences leadership?
Yeah, I mean, I gave you the example earlier on that one of the things that I realized I didn't like was actually sitting in an office looking at an Excel spreadsheet and looking at what would be the effect on the profit line by moving engineers from one location of the world to another location of the world. Actually means people. You're moving people around to actually get to squeeze extra levels of profitability out of the business. And you have to bear in mind that as somebody who runs a business, you have different demands on you. So SurfControl was a PLC. The shareholders' view of life is that they want a return on investment. So they're looking constantly at the EBITDA line. They're looking at where's the profitability come from? Where is the dividend eventually going to come from? Where is the business working on that situation?
Of course.
And that can actually conflict directly with actually the way the business is at any one moment in time. The fact that we had a number of engineers in Sydney to continue with the same example, and it was more cost effective to move those engineers to Shenzhen or to move it into China was a financial one. It was, and that's where the machine is actually saying, I want more profitability. How are you going to give it to me? But from an individual point of view, it's actually, what is the impact going to be on not just the individuals who potentially could lose their jobs in Sydney, but actually the whole organization by making decisions on that. And it's a very difficult balance. I hope I got more of those decisions right than wrong, but sometimes the demands of the machine do take you in directions that make decisions short term rather than long term.
Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma. It's one I've talked about in the past, and the words I've used is kind of like the decision between the mission and the people.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a clash, and I guess even in modern day when we talk about COVID and first line workers, putting them at risk so other people aren't at risk, and all, it's always a choice somewhere for someone all the time. I mean, put yourself into those kind of shoes again and go, how did you manage to balance those demands of what you felt and wanted for the people underneath you versus the demands of those shareholders above you that are looking at the profit?
Yeah, I suppose you mentioned earlier on, I would say, "Good morning, Rob, how are you doing?" And I'm terrible with names. So it was actually a big challenge for me to actually remember that you weren't called Martin or Bill.
So it's worthwhile to the listener to know you only hired people called Rob to make it easier.
Absolutely. If only. And I suppose from my personal point of view, I did manage by walking around. It's the old, Hewlett-Packard management style. Seeing what was going on, understanding it from individuals' views as well. And I don't think there was any job, and even today, I've just done the vaccinations, there isn't any job that I haven't done and tried to do myself to understand. People can do it much better than me, but at least I could understand what their challenges were within it. And I always felt proud of the fact that I knew people, and I would always make a point of, if I hadn't seen somebody before, I'd actually go and talk to them and find out who they were and what they were about. Putting a face onto a number is a much better way of understanding and being able to make some of those crucial decisions. It doesn't stop you having to make them sometimes. Because, as I say, trying to get that balance between what people want and what the overall arching requirement of the business is, do get into conflict. And some people, I've mentioned that I've been successful because of the people around me. There are limits to people. Some people don't want to be put out onto a limb and be working 7 days a week, 18 hours a day. Some people, their motivation is different, and it's actually having to understand those motivations, and then balancing it against everybody in the organization. If you're looking after 800 people, you have to balance, well, if I make a decision against one person, what is the impact on the other 799?
Oh, absolutely. You kind of mentioned about obviously walking around, leadership by walking around the office and seeing people and having people around you. I mean, I don't know if it was by design, but one of the things that I remember just very simply about your office location in the building at SurfControl was it was smack bang in the middle of the main floor that we had, and kind of not only that, it was probably the main thoroughfare that people walked through all the time, and more often than not, obviously there was times when it couldn't be, but more often than not, the door was open as well. And so many times that CEOs and senior leaders will go, "My door's open. Come in whenever you want to. I'm going to be visible." But you actually seem to put yourself in a position where you would notice when people started and faces arrived that you didn't notice. You put yourself in that physical position where most people in the organization would walk past your office every day. So if they did need to see you, they had no option. You were there. And that's not always the case. I mean, was that by design, or is that something you believe in?
It is something I believe in. I don't know if you remember, I actually had a sign on the door which says, this door's always open, even when it's closed, just come in. Yeah. It is important. But I mean, obviously, you've got to bear in mind that was okay for the headquarters in Congleton, but with 14 officers, you had to actually develop that same situation across the globe. And that was one of the reasons, for example, every year, I would, when we did the kickoff sessions, I would go, in a 14-day period, I would go to every office around the world. So everybody was aligned onto what the vision and the direction of the business was. And I don't, we used video conferencing long before Zoom and Skype and all that came along, just so we could actually see people, and it was. A massive cost in those days at the end of the 90s, beginning of the 2000s. But it was a worthwhile cost. Being able to see people, being able to see their body language. When somebody on the phone tells you everything's great and the body sumps down on the video, it ain't. So it was by design in the office in Congleton, but you had to live it across it. And I mean, to give you an example, when 9/11 happened, America went into shock. And I was on the very first plane out of Manchester that was allowed to leave the country to go back into America to go to the offices both in Boston and California, just to give them that understanding that things are still okay. The world hasn't come to an end. And sometimes, just being there and be, supportive can actually make a lot of difference. You have to let people do the jobs. But they, if they know that you're there and they know that you're supporting them, then it makes a lot of difference.
Absolutely. And I think there's a massive lesson in there for what we're actually experiencing now. Just simply because, we have got the benefits of Zoom and Skype and Teams and all these other platforms that we now use, but we've never been so dispersed, even locally in business, than we are right now. And I think it's really important that you talk about touching base with people. I remember when it wasn't so much that we were going through anything like this, but it was a time when I was leading a team that was remotely split across the entire of the United Kingdom. And one of the things I actually checked myself, I actually got some feedback on this that I actually kind of just processed myself and then went back and dealt with, because it was right. It was that I would only get in touch with people when I needed something.
Yeah.
And it's dead easy to kind of fall into that trap. The people around me. So you talk about Congleton, the people that were in the offices with me, I get those moments organically without even trying, that you might be walking to get a coffee, or you just walk into the photocopier or get your lunch or whatever it might be. You don't get those in those other remote locations. And now even fewer of those, not even those people that work locally to you, do you get them. So, that personal touch, how important is that? And how difficult can it be to keep that going?
It is difficult because of the fact that you get caught in your own world of to-do lists, and it was. I always prided myself in a lot of things. When you did walk around and you did chat to people, one of the things I tried to do is to find out what they wanted long term. And so, you mentioned Ross Dyer, for example, earlier on. That was a young guy who came in to look at porn 24 hours a day. Not in a way that you and I would be thinking of, but actually that was the business of SurfControl. It was stopping all the nasty images coming around, and you had to look at some of these images to classify it as bad or good. And it was a very tedious and a difficult job, but you could tell in his eyes and that he was capable of doing much more. And it's about opening doors for people, and you can't drag them through those doors, but if you open the doors for them and talking, like Peter Chownley that you probably remember, and Dale and people like that. Dale wanted to go back to Australia. There wasn't an opportunity for that to happen, but I remembered that. And 18 months later, we moved him to the Australian office. So if you understand what people's desires are, and you just take that little bit of time, then it's amazing what impact it will actually have. And you can't do it for everybody. No. But the ripple effect that it actually has in terms of, looking at people and helping them realize, they've got to do the work. Don't get me wrong. All you do is open the doors and give them opportunities. And some people take those opportunities and some people don't.
I think a lot now. I think it's fair to say that at SurfControl, whilst there were a number of senior leaders there, it was quite a young, energetic workforce as well. And I kind of look now on the likes of LinkedIn, and there's so many of the people who were in that experience with us that seem to be doing really well for themselves, and high-profile roles in other organisations now. That I think it's fair to say that what you're talking about happened for them. That their potential was explored and unleashed, and their belief in where they wanted to go became clearer as part of that experience. Do you keep in touch with quite a lot of those guys? Is that what they say about that, or not?
A lot more people keep in touch with me than I keep in touch with them. I'm actually terrible at the deal. I like to withdraw into my office, and so actually, funny enough, I'm quite happy in this world of COVID in that side. But I actually, despite what most people believe, I find it very challenging being in situations with people, and I have to actually work really hard I'm gobby, but on a one-to-one basis, I find it really, it's a real struggle for me in that. But coming back to it, people, as long as you treat people how you want to be treated, I think they will go that extra mile. Not because you want them to, because you give them the opportunity for them to do it themselves. And I think that's where a lot of people get it wrong. I think a lot of people, what I believe my management style has come from the fact that most of my original leaders were horrible. They were nasty, they were dominant, they tried to grind you into the ground. They actually led by fear. And I hated that. And most of my biggest lessons have actually come from what I would call crap leaders. I don't think I've got it right all the time, but I think I've got it right more often than not. And it does make me proud when I see on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and on all the different social media stuff, there's a lot of people still reaching out, from those days in SurfControl. I've done a lot more since. But it's that ripple effect. You've impacted people's lives. The fact that they are still there and they want to still talk to you. And as you say, SurfControl was sold in 2008, so it's 13 years ago.
Crazy.
Yet I can still see lots of people around the world who were affected by the work that you and I did.
Absolutely. I mean, it's quite big, I think, in kind of business mentoring at the minute. I know that people like Simon Sinek talks about it a lot, and I did an episode of this with a gentleman called Nick Shackleton-Jones, who's head of HR and learning and talent at Deloitte in the UK now as well. And they're very big, very big on the way you make people feel. And also that it's feelings that actually stay with you forever. It's you don't remember like the things you were taught necessarily. You remember how you were made to feel, and by the kind of what you call them, the kind of crap leaders that made you feel something in those moments. And I mean, I've done that. I think about that in terms of parenting, leadership, everything, that all those little things, even if you were a kid or you were an employee, things that made you feel bad in an organization or bad when you were a kid. You remember, I don't want the people in my team or my children or whatever it might be to feel that. That doesn't mean I'm not making my own mistakes. And probably sometimes they're thinking I'm not going to do that when I'm in that position. But that was a big for me as well.
Yeah, but failure is good. I mean, I fail every day of my life, and actually, it's one of those situations that if you're not failing, you're not doing anything in that element of it. And coming back to emotion, I mean, you probably remember sometimes I would jump onto a desk in the middle of an office and start saying things. Quite often, the words didn't make any sense whatsoever. But the emotion and the passion that I come out with would send people away going, yeah, we do that. And they had no clue what I actually said. But, if you have that passion, and one of the things that I find really frustrating when I meet people who are running businesses is they've got no passion. If they haven't got passion, then how is everybody going to do what they want them to do out of it? Passion is just core to everything that you have to do.
Exactly. I mean, it's immediately obvious, even if we didn't know what you'd said. It's obvious he cares about it, so I care about it. I'm going to do more on that. Brilliant.
And then go back to Martin Luther King. The passion that he had was, he had a dream. He didn't have a plan. He had a dream. And people believe in dreams. They don't believe in a 12-point plan. And Walt Disney used to tell stories, and it's all of. If you look at the great leaders, it's that where they touch people emotionally. I suppose, given the fact that I'm average at most things, being able to touch people emotionally is something that I feel quite proud about.
Definitely. I mean, some things I want to explore a bit more there, because I think, there's two things to talk about there. I think one is overall what your views are about what great leadership is. And we've got a couple of examples there. I think we could delve into that a little bit more. But I think first, what kind of define a little bit more is how you feel your standard or your type and style of leadership is. And before maybe going into that, you said something that I just want to pick up on, which was around, like, sometimes you wouldn't actually, it wasn't necessarily your natural style, like around people, for example. my take on leadership and the framework I've built around leadership is that it starts with yourself, and you need to be able to lead yourself before you can lead others to a certain degree. And those two things are always then running in parallel. If you're a leader who has to maybe step out of a personal comfort zone to get in a position to lead in a way that you want to lead, is that exhausting? Is that right? Is that wrong? What impact does it have on yourself to do that?
I mean, you have to. It is tiring, but I mean that's what your job is. It's a case of you want people to do things that they themselves may not be comfortable with. So if you're not prepared to come out of your comfort zone, why should they? In that element of it, and actually, you do find that understanding that adrenaline is brown and being able to drive things and living on that edge of adrenaline is actually something that's very, very rewarding at the end of the day. And again, it's not right for everybody, and you have to spot that some people don't like to live on the edge and don't want and just want that 9 to 5 static and comfortable role. And it's wrong for leaders to try and push everybody out into the same place like that. But for me, it was I performed much better when I was outside my comfort zone than when I'm inside it. But you do have to remember that that's not for everybody, and you have to be able to turn the knob accordingly for the person who just wants to be there 9 to 5. But actually is key to the business by the fact that they are there 9 to 5 and they're doing the core work.
And how important was it? You mentioned that actually in these COVID times that we're in, that it actually suits you down to the ground in some respects. How important it was that you pushed yourself out of the comfort zone to kind of have that sanctuary to be yourself and recharge that went alongside that?
I suppose when I'm in the thick of it, I mean, when we were in the thick of SurfControl and before that JSB and after that We7 and after that, whatever, there isn't no time, as we said earlier on. To me, there are 8 days in a week and 28 hours in a day. So I've only got 2 speeds, full on or stop. And the bits in between just doesn't compute. So it's just natural.
It sounds like it just made me think of something me and my mate say when we used to, in the good old days when you were allowed out and go to a pub. Yeah, we had 2 speeds. It was very much go for it, and then suddenly we'd stop. Couldn't do any more. Age catching up with the 2 of us, I think.
Absolutely.
If you were,
what's a pub?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think we're going back to the times of the little pubs, hopefully, the little boutique ones. It's a distant memory when I were a lad. Yeah, when I were a lad, we had these things called pubs. So if you were to kind of sum up in just kind of like in a sentence or two, how you would classify or define your style of leadership, what would it be over the years?
I think we've mentioned people. It's always people centric. Whether it's customers, whether it's your shareholders, whether it's the people that you're working with. What makes businesses hard are people. So if you don't actually look at people, then and you don't look after the people or whatever category they happen to be in, then you're on a hiding to nothing. But if you add on top of that, I think there's 2 other things that's really key for me. One's passion and one's focus. You have to be passionate about everything that you do. It's the passion that actually makes people want to be with you and want to do the things that you want. It's the passion that gives them the ability to find something to believe in. And, people who believe in things end up doing far more on the side of it. But focus is the one that actually, again, I think a lot of Brits get wrong. If you look at the Americans, you have billionaires who do one thing. They do nail bars. Or I came across a guy who was a billionaire because he does ducks. And you might say, well, and it was anything to do with ducks, like plastic ducks, ornamental ducks, the most bizarre business. Yet it was a $1 billion business, and on the back of doing ducks. And he once said he was going to expand. I said, what are you going to expand into? He says, penguins. and it was the most bizarre conversation, but he had focus. And you see that in it, because they've got a 300 million people market, you see that singular focus being very, very successful. In the UK, we have this desire to do a bit of this and a bit of that, and we can do that. We'll bend this to do this. No, you can't, focus is critical. And if you've got focus, people around you understand. You look at the best football managers; they have very clear focus of what they want their team to deliver against and how they want to deliver it. It doesn't always go right, but they know. If you're all over the place, say, well, we should do this or we should do that. It's a nightmare. So passion and focus and people.
Yeah, absolutely. You reminded me of a stand-up sketch that a comedian called Dave Gorman did once, and he talked about the difference between presents and gifts. And when you said ducks there, it's like you say to someone you like something, like ducks, and suddenly every present you get is duck related, and that's probably how he made his money. But the kind of comedy sketch behind it was, so I love Jack Daniel's honey, the drink Jack Daniel's honey, and then by virtue of that, what you then get is people will buy you glasses that say Jack Daniel's honey and T-shirts that say Jack Daniel's honey. And it's like, well, no, I like Jack Daniel's honey. I don't like T-shirts that say it. But that's the business model, because they were making the money out of it.
But there's a good situation. What is the focus there? There is that one thing, a single statement. The focus gets diluted in a way which doesn't actually meet what you were really meaning by that. And business, you have to have that clear focus. This was part of, I mentioned earlier on about going around to every office at the beginning of the year. It was to try and create that singular focus, which is going to drift as soon as you leave the office. But at least everybody has the same starting point as you move forward.
Yeah, it's like a little boost or that little shot in the arm at the start to make everything consistent, which is, is key. I mean, and again, coming back to my framework, leading with that vision and the values associated with that vision is key, rather than starting with results and performance. It's that will lead into results and performance.
Sorry.
No, go on. Please, Steve.
No, it was just that situation about you mentioned the word vision. Vision is very American in that side of it, but the way I would actually say, a vision gives you focus and it gives you passionate purpose in that, and that does help. And again, you get these people who will change that almost on a whim and a prayer. You've got to have some element of consistency. You don't have to be worried about changing things, but at the same time, the more consistent and the sharper that passionate story can actually be, and the more focused it is, the more chance that you're going to have success.
100%. No, I completely agree with you. There was a couple of things that we mentioned around that. So you talked about yourself as a leader there and what's important to you. And there was another couple of things that when we spoke a couple of weeks ago. Actually, I've got 3 written down. 1, trust.
Yeah.
The second one was role modeling. And I think we had a bit of a conversation about the likes of Steve Jobs and Richard Branson and those kind of characters and how they compare at that as well. And then the third one, which I thought was a belting piece of advice, which we'll probably kind of come on to as well, was the dad formula that you inherited from an interesting character. If you want to share that story.
Yeah. So which one of those 3 things do you want to go in first?
Let's start with dad, because I love the story. It made me chuckle again.
Well, I'll tell you the story, so for the benefit of the listener on this. I once went to Dublin to a conference where I was actually giving a keynote presentation. There was actually a checkpoint firewall business from America, and I got picked up at the airport by a taxi driver. And the Irish are fantastic, and I can't do the Irish accent, but they just understand life in every way. And this taxi driver just turned to me. He says, "Have you got kids?" And I said, "Yeah, I've got 2." He says, He says, do you know what dad stands for? And I said, no, go on, tell me. He says, well, the first D is when a child goes from being born to 8 or 10, he says, you have to direct them. You've got to tell them what to do. He says the A, when they get over 10, you've got the A stands for, you've got to advise them, because you can't tell them anything anymore. You've got to advise them what to do. And he said, when they get to 16, you can't advise them what to do because they know everything by that time. And what you have to do is discuss things. And he says, the reason there's conflict in families is because the parents don't understand at what point that part changes for the children. When do you have to stop directing them? When do you have to start advising them? And when do you have to start discussing things with them? And I just thought in that single story, this wonderful taxi driver just summed up life. Because even today, my daughter is 30 and my son is 28, and I'm still directing them. I'm still telling them what to do. And it's actually a hard philosophy to implement. And I remember taking that back into business and thinking about it in a way that said, well, how do you apply that? What is it that happens? And so one of the things that I learned is that people don't decide very quickly. They spend a lot of time justifying the decision that they probably made at the very beginning. So I changed dad to be decide, action, and direct. You've got to make decisions quickly. You've got to act upon those decisions. And if people are not following you at that point, you've got to tell them what to do. You've got to direct them. So, but it's not as good as the family one from the taxi driver. But it just shows you, if you're prepared to listen, there's lots of life lessons out there.
Absolutely. I think we should put a poll when we post this podcast. We'll put a poll to see which dad formula they prefer.
Yeah, I've already lost that one. So don't worry about that.
Well, I think you're right, though. I mean, I think, and going back to the way it makes people feel, now that's important. Straight away, just the words that we use there makes me go, right, how do I do that? So I've got a 10-year-old and a 15-year-old, and how are they different, and how have they changed themselves over the last couple of years? And oh my God, yeah, that makes me suddenly realize it's always easier with someone else's kids to go, what you should be doing. Give them a bit of space. They're a teenager. They need this. And then when I come home to my teenager, I'm like, no, do this, make your bed, clean your room. Why is she not listening?
Yeah, understanding it and doing it are two different things. And that's another lesson for business. Understanding what you've got to do and actually doing it is really, really hard.
Absolutely. So we come on to the next one. So trust. Now, trust again it's a big thing for me. It's inside my framework again. But what do you mean by trust in terms of leadership, and why is it important?
Well, the first thing is trust is two-way. It's too many. Some of the crap leaders, we'll go back to them. They wanted you to give them total trust, but if you couldn't trust them, it just didn't work. And so from a leader, the people who are working with you have to feel that you've got the back, or have to know that you're being honest with them. And that was the key. Sometimes you have to give some difficult messages. If you are consistently honest and they can trust you, then they know that what you're saying is because you've got no other choice to say it. Or what you're saying is true because you're saying how wonderful they are, you mean it. In that, so trust is two-way. That's the big one from that side of it, and it just goes through. It's like a stick of rock. If you trust people to do their jobs, they will actually reward you. Sometimes you've got to guide them, and it's hard. That point between guidance and micromanagement is actually a very difficult line to manage. I don't always get that right. In fact, I know I don't get that right, especially when I get so passionate about getting to the end game. I suddenly find I'm actually delving in, and that actually destroys a bit of trust, because the people themselves are saying, well, do you not believe I can do this? In their mind, they won't be saying it to your face, but that's what they'll believe in. So trust is critical.
And again, it's that balance of what comes before it as well, because you've actually, in the style that you've talked about, you've given that trust up front. You've actually looked at what's important to the person. You've actually given them the tools to go and do it themselves, and that's what's made them at the end go, don't you trust me to do this because you've set me up to do it myself? Whereas some leaders from the start don't give that trust up front. I remember one of the leaders that I had at Sky, it was only a secondment, so it's only 6 months. He was my manager, my direct manager. But in the 6-month meeting, as he was going on to his other role, his permanent role, he just said to me, at the start, I gave you my trust. I can now say that you've earned it.
Yeah.
And I walked away and I kind of thought about that, and I just thought that's a really good way of putting it, because it made me reflect back and go, you absolutely did give me your trust, and you had no reason to trust me at the time. we hardly knew each other. Based on an interview, there you go, have a crack at it. And trust is so central to me. I think it's Stephen Covey, or it's certainly Stephen Covey Jr., the guy that wrote a book about the speed of trust. And I think he describes it as like credits and debits that you build up over time. So it actually does become a bit more resilient. So if things like that you've just mentioned do happen, those little tweaks, those little mistakes maybe, or micromanaging when we need to step back, the trust you've built is far more resilient, and it can take it because it's a deeper level. Whereas if you've not built that up to start with and you're micromanaging, there's nothing much in the bank. And so it's eliminated immediately. And now I don't trust you at all because you've been micromanaging me.
Yeah. I mean, well, one of my personal challenges is, well, it's not a challenge, it's actually a strength and a challenge, is I must be slightly dyslexic because I don't think in words, I think in pictures. Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, when problems happen or I want to get to a certain position, I jump from one location, I jump from A to Z in basically one leap. And that's, yeah, my cup of tea has just arrived behind me there.
Excellent. Oh, can I get Britt one as well?
Sorry about that. It's like a BBC session with the little kid rooms in.
It's the grandstand screens behind the Steve. Honestly, I mean, the first one of these I did with Graham Wilson. I probably got a little bit uptight about these things because like the doorbell was going, there was people chatting outside, and I was like going, and when I was editing, I actually said to myself, right, let me see how noticeable that is. And I could hear the doorbell and I went, I'm going to have to edit that out now. And it's in the middle of that bit and I don't want to. And I went, you know what? Stuff it. That's what's happening in the world at the minute. And since then, I've just gone, dogs walk in, kids start crying, doorbells goes, Amazon deliveries, whatever. It can be in the show because that people listening to it are doing the same thing.
Yeah, it's life. And so if we go back to what we were saying, I think in pictures, so I missed a lot of steps out in my mind. And that's one of my greatest challenges with people who don't do that, who have to go from A, B, C, D, E, and F. Mm-hmm. And I'm already at Z, and I'm trying to desperately get them to jump forward. And that creates a pressure. That is my problem with it, without a doubt, on that.
But it's that visionary element again, isn't it? You know, you can set the picture. This is where I want to go, and I want to build that journey together. And some people, they want to know everything about the journey before actually understanding the destination. Tell me what we're going to be doing together, and then I'll decide if I want to come on it with you. No, we'll build that together.
Exactly. And it really is, I mean, you see all these wonderful posters, life is a journey, not a destination. Unfortunately, I'm a destination type of person. I want to get there, and so part of my strength is to get people to come along with me, understand that the destination is the dream. But sometimes I have to get them kicking and screaming sometimes.
Yeah, exactly, and the journey can be in itself a wonderful experience if you don't overplan it. So the last one was role modeling.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've got one of these things that I say quite a lot again, that is that you get the team you deserve. And quite recently, another ex-SurfControl person that you'll know well, I've done a lot of work last year with Alan Kenny.
Yeah.
And what we used to say together was that senior leadership really needs to be its own best case study. So in the things that it says, in the kind of values and the vision and the behaviors that they kind of talk about that the company needs to show, if they're not showing them, how is there any credibility that anyone else should be showing them? So role modeling for you, talk to me about the importance of that.
I mean, I'm a big believer that you never stop learning. And so, if you look at the people that are out there, you've got Steve Jobs is probably my ultimate hero in terms of business. When you listen to, he was massively passionate. He was massively focused. He wasn't necessarily the nicest guy in the room from when you listen to some of the reports and things like that are there. But he understood that, in his case, detail and focus and passion was paramount to everything that he did. And, he created the world's biggest and, still today the best company that most people will talk about. And then you got people like Richard Branson, who's totally opposite. Probably he seems to be on the surface to be the most relaxed guy on the planet. So relaxed he's almost asleep most of the time, and but yet he creates these dreams. But when again, sometimes you never know whether the story fits the hindsight, or whether the story is actually real. But when you listen to how close to the edge he got with and it was Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells, which actually changed everything round and allowed him to go from a point of almost failure to the fact that he now is selling rides to space. But it's not just the obvious ones. You go back in time and you look at people like John Harvey Jones, who used to run ICI, and during the 80s he was in a TV documentary called Troubleshooter. And if you ever get a chance to watch some of that, it was just fantastic. And I also remember one scene where he was at Triang in Nottingham, who make bikes, and he had the production director, the sales director, and the marketing director on the shop floor. None of them knew what each of them did, and he just pulled it, and just the way he was just talking to them, asking questions, just brought up to the reason why Triang was suffering as a business in that. So I love watching people and listening to people. When I've seen Bill Gates talk, he is fundamentally a geek. He's not the most eloquent speaker and things like that, but he does have that, that common theme that they all have. They have that passion, that common theme that they all have. They all have focus. I've tried to live by some of that, not as successfully as they are, but I've enjoyed life.
And you've not been trying to go around the world in hot air balloons or get to space or anything, Steve, yet either? Not yet.
No, but you never know.
There's time yet.
There's time yet. I've got a telescope.
Well, as long as you take off and land back in Congleton just to put us on the map, then I'm more than happy to support that. So I guess looking at all those things, I think one of the thing that I'm really interested again from your opinion is that quite a lot of the guests I have on the podcasts are from either an L&D background, a HR background, or actually leadership development and leadership consultancy. And I like to kind of put these bits in where we have real leadership experience into the series. In terms of preparing leaders of the future, especially with the challenges that we have now, all these things that we talk about, how is it best to actually develop our future leaders? What sort of role do L&D and HR have in that, and what's the balance with the actual senior leadership and the leaders of leaders in developing that future generation?
I'm going to answer that in two ways. One is a direct way, and one is a slightly indirect way. So if we do the direct way first, we've mentioned the word trust. You've got to provide the ability to spot the people that have the capacity to do something. That they may not believe they have the capacity, but you can look into their eyes, and most of them will actually, you just see a sparkle there. And the job of any leader, at whatever level it is to actually open those doors that allows those opportunities to happen. And you mentioned a whole lot of people, Alan Kenny, Ross Dyer. There's a litany of people that I can actually mention who, over the years, or just by opening the doors, they just will take a step through. And you've got to trust them to get on with that. So anybody, and you don't have to be a leader to do this, you have to actually allow people to have the choices. If you can give people choices, that's the most valuable thing in the world to give them. And what they do with those choices, actually, it's up to them.
Yep.
So that would be the first thing. The indirect one is, and this is going to be a strange thing. One is to understand the concept of marketing and what that means. And let me actually just give you a story. One of the businesses I was involved with was a company called JSB Computer Systems back in the 80s and the early 90s. And I was, at the time, sales director of this business. And suddenly the boss said, right, we need somebody to look after marketing. You're probably closest to it. You're now the marketing director. And this was in a board meeting. And I resigned on the spot. I said, I'm not going to become marketing director, and I'm leaving. And I actually resigned and walked out to the boardroom at that moment in time. And I got home, and Julie, my wife, said, so why have you resigned? And I said, well, he wants to make me marketing director. And you have to understand that in the 80s, there were in the computer industry, there were two groups of people. There were salespeople and marketing people. And marketing people, salespeople would go around with their blue suits on and the nice red tie. And the marketing people would go around with their blue suits on and a nice red tie and a hanky sticking out of their pockets. And marketing people were failed salesmen. And I wasn't a failed salesman at that time. I hadn't failed. I do fail every day, but I hadn't failed in its entirety. And I was devastated that somebody thought that I could become marketing director on that side of it. And this was, again, a bad leader teaching me what not to do. And suddenly my wife says, do you know what marketing is? And I went, well, actually, no, I don't. And so I went back into the office the following day. And I says, okay, I'm going to put my resignation on hold. I said, but you're going to pay for me to go and find out what marketing is. And I went on a strategic marketing course, which had lasted for a week. And it was the best thing I ever did. And when you understand, strategic marketing is really about a lot of what we've been talking about. It's about understanding the people, the customers, understanding your employees, understanding the people that you're working with, understanding what turns them on, what drives them. This is why people, if you look at Apple is the best marketing company in the world because it can sell anything and people want it. They create that emotional connection. And so the reason why I've answered it in two different ways, one is the direct way about giving people choices. The other one is, I would actually say, is teach people about real marketing, understanding strategic marketing in whatever role that you're doing. Because if you understand the emotional triggers that turn on your customers or turn on the people that you work with or turn on your shareholders, then you go a lot further. So we talked about emotion at the very beginning. That's actually a very powerful thing to teach somebody. Absolutely.
I mean, I think that's a fantastic piece of insight, actually. I really, really do. Because something I've talked about in the past is that when you're trying to set people up for success in an organization, it looks very different, even though it's very similar to how we set up customers. So I talk about website systems that, the customer can't go on a website and buy your product on one screen with one login and do it within a number of minutes. then you failed. You're going to lose that custom. Whereas the same process internally, when a customer's on the phone and the frontline advisor's having to sell it to them, might be 5 different systems with 5 different logins and a help system to help them guide through those 5 different systems. And you kind of go, well, why are we going to put our frontline staff through something that we would never put our customers through? And it links into that for me. I've never thought of it that way. And I think that's a great bit of insight for people.
Okay.
And that served you well over the years then. That's that kind of,
well, it changed. That insight, that sudden knowledge was the catalyst that actually changed what was a nice little business into a global success.
Fantastic.
That one instant, the fear of actually becoming a marketing director changed the whole of the outlook of where we go.
That's it. I know what everyone's going to be doing immediately after listening to this episode. Signing up for strategic marketing courses. Brilliant stuff. Well, that's been a great conversation. The last thing I want us to do, Steve, obviously, is the title of the show is Leadership Untitled. And what I like to do at the end of each episode is to kind of look back at just quickly at what we've been talking about and agree together what the episode title will be based on that conversation. Where's your thoughts? What stands out for you as part of that conversation?
Passion, focus, and strategic marketing.
There we go then. Be a strategic marketing director. Perfect. That's exactly what we'll go for. Thank you so much again for joining us today, Steve. I've really enjoyed that conversation, and I hope you have too. If people are interested in following you or looking at anything else that you're doing, what's the best place for them to do that?
Just Google me, I suppose, in that side of it, because it's always changing in that side of it. I'm not a blogger. I don't actually do, hey, look what I'm doing today. So, just, in fact, I wouldn't bother following. Just go and enjoy their own life.
Enjoy your own life. And if you ever want to, Google Steve, just see where he is.
Yeah, Google me, yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much. And have a great day, and we'll speak soon.
Rob, thank you very much.
Cheers now. Bye-bye. So that brings us to the end of the Leadership Untitled podcast for today. This episode will be called Passion, Focus and Strategic Marketing. All that remains is for me to thank Steve again for joining me and having a wonderful conversation and sharing all his insights and experience, and obviously you, the listener, for listening in for the duration of the conversation. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future episodes, and if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook. Just Google my name or send me an email at rob@robmores.com. Speak soon.